for taking your time out on a Sunday to talk to me. I really appreciate it. Say your name again for me so I can say it correctly in the podcast.
Alrighty, my name is Betsy Bernett Belanger.
Okay.
It's the hyphenated name.
Okay. And are you originally from St. Louis?
I am. I was born here. I lived away for a few years, but I've been back here for many, many years after that. Yeah.
Okay. And how long have you been working with the Lemp Mansion?
Almost 25 years.
Wow. So you are very familiar with the building and the family, of course.
I am. It's my pleasure to be too. I really love it. So that's what started me on the path, was that I loved it so much. But
Oh, it's a beautiful place. As I told you before, I went there in high school, I think was the last time I was there. So back in the 90s, and absolutely loved it. And of course, Halloween was always my place to be. What is your role there at the mansion?
oh, Steve,
Oh, there you are.
well, you're back now.
You paused for a moment.
Yeah.
What is your role there at the mansion? What is your title and what do you do?
Well, actually, I am the historian, but I'm also the official, I guess you might call it, paranormal investigator. So that's what I do. I also work there now. I've been for about the last couple of years in the restaurant part of it. So that's just been really fun. I'm a hostess. I call myself the front door executive, but they call me a hostess. Anyway, so I love it. I get to meet all kinds of people and hear stories, and people bring me pictures, and it's just great. Well, not now, but
Right.
normally this is what happens. Yeah.
Right, and it will be again. It will be again.
It will be again. Yes.
Yes. So let's talk about the history for a moment of the Lemp Mansion.
All right.
I know it was built in the 1860s, if I remember correctly.
You're right.
But what a tragic family. Tell me a little bit about the history and how the Lemp Empire came to be.
Well, it actually started with a man by the name of Johann Adam Lemp. Now, he liked to be called Adam, so that's what we'll call him. And Adam was a German immigrant. He came here into the United States in the 1830s. He finally ended up in St. Louis about 1838. Now, he was already a very wealthy man. He also had lots of skills, and one of the skills that he had mastered in Germany was making beer. He was a brewmeister. They call it there, a master brewer. So that's what he really wanted to do, but he had to earn his way. He had to make his name known and so forth and so forth. You can't see it, but my hand is going over here. I'm telling the story with my hand.
That's great.
Anyway, so there's Adam in St. Louis. He opens up a small business operation, a mercantile, they used to call it, a grocery business, which eventually he adds on a room to start serving beer, and he serves the community a beer called German lager beer. No one had ever tasted that before. It was new, and people loved it. They just loved it. So he became very popular, got his name out there, and he closed the business, opened up a brewery. Now, the brewery was called the Western Brewing Company. That he came about 1838. And so the Western Brewing Company was going very strong by the 1850s. And that's how the Lemp Brewery, although it was called the Western Brewery, got its hold on St. Louis back as far back as that. Well, Adam died in 1862, and everything was taken over by his son. And his son was William Jacob Lemp, who changed the name of the brewery to the William J. Lemp Brewing Company. And so then, and that was about 1864 by the time that it was now located in the area that it is now in, what's known as the South St. Louis area, Benton Park, and so forth. So that's kind of how they got their foothold there, but it went on from there, of course.
Oh. And did Adam die of natural causes? I'm assuming he was very wealthy by the time he passed on.
He was a very wealthy man, yes, and a very well-known man. But yes, he died. He was an older gentleman by then, and he passed away. Turned out, his son had been working, with his father, so he knew the business inside and out. And now Adam was a very intelligent man and a very, very good businessman. But his son was even more so. He just ran with that. He was almost a business genius. And this is William Lemp. And he really made it
Oh, I may have lost you for a moment.
Um,
Oh, there you are. I lost you for a moment.
okay,
This technology. So
that's
you were,
okay.
so sorry about that. So you were saying that the younger Lemp was a genius, business genius.
He truly was. He was just, he knew how to treat his workers. He knew how to be well known in the community. He helped the community everywhere he could. He even sat on the board of directors of other smaller breweries. He was just a very philanthropic man. He really, and not only wealth, of course, he was becoming more wealthy and more wealthy, but he was a very small man. Are you still there? Okay. He was
Okay.
a very small man. He was a short little guy. I'm 5 foot tall. He was 5 foot tall, so I can relate. But he made up for it in his power. He ruled everything with an iron fist, I guess, including his family. But he ended up having 10 children, so he had to be on top of things.
Right. That's a lot to handle.
So
But since he was a philanthropist, I'm assuming he was well liked by the
yeah,
St. Louis community. Would that be a right assumption?
he was admired. Yes, it would be a good. He was admired. It wasn't the cutthroat business that it is today. With a lot of competition. Although there was competition, even with the Bush Brewery, which is very close to where the Lemp Brewery was. But they were very close friends, the Bushes and the Lemps. But he treated his workers so well. They were German immigrants similar to him, and so they didn't understand some of the way that the United States worked. For instance, the banking system. So he paid them in cash. And he
Okay.
knew every one of their names. He knew their family history. He could ask them questions about their families, and they adored him. And that's when they knew something was wrong after he went through this deep depression. I'm sure you're going to ask me about that, and he withdrew from them, and he didn't know them anymore, and he was very withdrawn and distracted, they said.
And I'm glad you brought that up because if I believe it was his child, one of his sons passed away, right? And that kind
Yes,
of started this depression system.
it was one of his younger sons. He had 6 surviving sons after um, the loss of
I think we're having connection issues again. I hate that I'm going to have to ask you to repeat this part.
Where did you leave off with me there?
You were saying that I'd asked you about the depression and his son, and as you started talking about he had 6 surviving children, and then I lost you.
Yes. Oh, okay. Well, it was 6 surviving sons, actually. He had 10 children altogether. And out of the sons, his favorite son his name was Frederick. And Frederick was one of his younger boys. And Frederick was this guy that everybody liked. That kind of person. He was smart and he was kind and he was a good man and he was handsome as he could be. And unfortunately, it was William's favorite, and he made no bones about it. He always called him my boy. He had all these other sons, so I'm sure it was a little sore subject. But he was also the one that William put all of his hopes and dreams in. He was hoping that he would be the heir apparent when William retired and take over, and that didn't happen because Frederick became ill, young age ill. He was in his late 20s, and just past his mid 20s. And it's come to light he probably had tuberculosis, but he was sent away and he died in California, and William never recovered from that loss. He went into such a deep depression for a few years after it. That was 1901 when Frederick died.
So there you go again. So 1901 was when Frederick passed away, and that's what
Yes,
sent the elder Lemp into a depression.
yes.
He didn't live too much longer after that, correct? I mean, he kind of started spiraling really badly pretty quickly. If I,
Yeah, 3 more years after that. Frederick died right before Christmas in 1901 and December 12th, and William took his life on February 13th, 1904.
and that
But
was in Mansion,
go on.
correct?
That was at the Lemp Mansion, the first suicide in the Lemp Mansion. It was upstairs on the second floor in his bedroom. And no one thought that he was contemplating suicide because he had been so withdrawn and he spent a lot of his time in his room or reading in the library or some, he just, he didn't venture out very, very much and he didn't communicate with people. So in the morning when he told his wife he wasn't feeling well and going back to lay down, she really didn't think anything of it and went ahead and left the house to do the daily shopping that she had to do. He
Mhm.
went back upstairs and he took his life.
And he used a gun, correct? He shot
He used
himself.
a gun. He shot himself in the head. But he didn't die right away. In fact, he lingered for a little bit. He died before they left the house, before they took him away from the house, I should say. But he was still alive when they found him. The servants heard the noise, and they were the only ones in the house besides him. And then they called his sons, who broke down the door and discovered their father's body. The wife came home. Julia came home. She cradled him in her arms, and he died.
Wow, what a messy scene. That's horrible to
It
imagine.
was. It kind of set a precedent, I guess you might call it, for the rest of the family. There were 3 more suicides after that.
Right. Yeah, I know there were 4 suicides total, if I remember my research right. After he passed away, who took over the business? Who did he pass it along to? There you are again.
Yeah, is it my connection here, you think, or is it you? I don't know. It's probably me. I
Um,
seem to
I,
have.
I think it might be on your side, but I don't mind the pauses. We just might have to repeat some stuff. So I'm sorry if I ask you the same question a couple
Okay,
of times.
that's okay.
So
That's all right. Yeah, fun.
so after he passed away, after he killed himself, what happened to the business? Who did he pass it along to?
Well, it was supposed to be his son Frederick, and then when he died, it had crushed the hopes of his older son, his oldest boy, whose name was William Jr. He's also known as Billy Lemp, and he took over the reins in 1904. But it was only by default, he knew that, and it kind of played on his mind the rest of his life, knowing that he was not his father's choice. But he kept the business going until approximately 1918, and they really didn't sell the brewery complex until 1922, right before Billy Lemp committed suicide.
Wow. And I know that he's the second suicide, right? Billy's the
He
second
was the
suicide.
second. Yes, he was the second. He
What were
was
the
the oldest
circum
boy.
what were the circumstances around his? Was there signs of depression there too?
So much so. He was a very complicated man. He was he was a very brutal man at times. So it's been reported from some of the things that he was involved in, from animal fights in the brewery to other things. He would carry a gun with him all the time, but he also would refer back constantly. If it's good enough for my father, it's good enough for me. So that could have meant so many different things, from carrying that gun, laying the gun on the dinner table. So now he did it so the servants would move quicker. When William Sr. did it, it was so he could control the conversation. And then also to the suicide. If it's good enough for my father, it's good enough for me. Billy went through a lot of changes. He became the head of the brewery. He didn't keep up with things though, like he should have, or like his brothers and the board of directors and so forth wanted him to, because he felt the old ways were better. Well, it didn't work out, but they kept going. They kept being the powerhouse. Money kept rolling in and rolling in. And he divorced his first wife, who is known as the Lavender Lady, and I'm sure maybe your viewers or you are familiar with her. There's so many stories I could tell you about her. She is an amazing, charismatic, I don't know, she's the most romantic figure of the whole Lemp saga, but that's Lillian Hanlon Lemp. Well, they divorced in 1909. He changed the mansion then in 1911 into the office. And they took it personally. I'll just keep going. And he took that amendment that was going to be, he took it personally. He said the government's out to get me. So he was really despondent about that. But plus he had a lot of physical ailments. He was suffering a bit with that. So when he quit making beer by 1918, the end part of 1919, Prohibition, the amendment was passed, and it became an amendment in 1920. So in that year, a lot of things happened. One of his other brothers passed away, not from suicide. His sister died of a suicide. Actually, Billy was the third suicide. His sister supposedly was the second suicide. We'll get to that in just a minute. Okay. But then he made it a few more years, decided to auction off the complex. He had had enough. He didn't want to be in the business anymore. He was tired. And so he auctioned it off, got a pittance for what it was worth. And a few months after that, he committed suicide in the house again, in his office that is right inside the door of the Lemp Mansion as you come in.
Okay, so on the first floor.
Yes. Yes.
And you said that was in 1922?
1922. December 29th, 1922. Now, his sister had supposedly committed suicide on March 20th, 1920. But there's a lot of speculation that she didn't commit suicide, that she was actually murdered by her husband.
And that was elsewhere. That was not at the mansion, right?
Correct. That was in her own home. She was a very wealthy woman by that time too, and she controlled the purse strings in her marriage. And so he ended up being a very wealthy man after her death, her husband, that is. Mm-hmm. But it was ruled that it was a suicide. So she was 37 years old.
Wow, another young one. And yes. If I read right, they had divorced, but they had reconciled. Is that correct?
They divorced. She had enough of him. He was just kind of not a nice person, and he cheated on her, and she knew it. And I don't know, they had a very volatile relationship. Now, the reason that she married him to begin with was because she was getting a little bit older. She wasn't that keen on getting married, but in order to get her inheritances and to own property, she needed a husband. So she had to get married. She found a guy that would. He'll work. And so they got married, but it didn't work out at all. So they even had a child together that died. And there's a lot of sorrow in her life. So but she was a go-getter. I mean, she was this firebrand of the day. She used to drive fast cars and get into trouble with one of her siblings who was almost like her twin. They were so close in age. Mm-hmm. So when he charmed his way back into her life after the divorce. And they married, and 11 days after their honeymoon, she ends up dead.
Wow.
In her bedroom. When she died, he was the only one there besides her. So.
Very, very suspicious. Very strange.
Very suspicious. It truly is. It truly is.
And this weighed on her brother, I'm sure, with everything else that he was dealing with.
Oh my gosh, he felt that he should have protected her. You know, these are some of the things I tell you like that are communications that I've had with the spirits. Billy Lemp get together, and I get some information sometimes because of my spiritualist background, I guess.
Okay, so Billy has given you some of this info firsthand, so to speak.
Some of it, yes. Right. Some I've done research forever. You know, before I even started at the Lemp Mansion 25 years ago, I was researching. But, you know, people are sometimes forthcoming with information and pictures and things like that. So I've been a very lucky person, believe me.
I definitely want to ask you more about that. But before
Okay,
I do,
sure,
I want to get to the fourth death, the fourth suicide. So,
Charles.
yes. So lead me up through how that one, how we get to that point.
Now, Charles. Charles was a middle brother, and he was very attached to so many things. He was a very quiet man. He was a very introverted man. Some say he was a sourpuss. His brothers used to call him that. But he just was very analytical. He liked math, and he ended up in the banking business. But he was still living in the house at 1910. Now, he was the only one. We call it today.
Oh,
Where'd you leave off with me?
I heard he was the only one in the house in 1920.
Okay. And Billy, his older brother, wanted to change the mansion into the offices, as I told you. So he forcefully, I guess, encouraged his brother to find his own way. And so he created this estate for himself. But he had been withdrawing even more. He had become what we call today a germaphobe. He didn't like people around him. And so he decided to travel. And he was becoming ill on his travels. And he was sending all the things that he purchased. Now, he was a collector, and so he purchased all kinds of riches all over the world and had them sent back to St. Louis, but never to his estate. He always had them sent back to the Lemp Mansion. So when he became too ill to travel, he came back there too and opened up the house again and began to live there. And he lived there from the 1930s until his death in 1949. He lived there only with two servants and his dog, and his dog's name was Serva. Now, that's a communication too that I received of her name. And so he was always attached. He chose a bedroom upstairs because it had been his grandparents' room. Well, then, even though there was an elevator there, the servants were having a hard time taking care of him. So they moved him downstairs and they gutted this little room that had been a small, cozy little library into a bedroom for him. And so on May 10th, 1949, they found him dead in that room. He had shot himself, and he had also shot his dog to take her with him.
Wow.
He's the one who left the suicide note, the only one, and the only suicide note that was left.
And he in charge at all of the Lemp estate? Was he in charge of the brewery, or was he disconnected from that because he had traveled so much?
The brewery was long gone. The brewery had been sold in 1920. The
Okay.
whole complex. It was no longer part of the Lemp estate at all. The only thing that he was in charge of was his own estate, and probably the estate of maybe his sisters and stuff like his sister who was no longer living. But the rest of them, the sisters had husbands, so they were gone from that aspect of the life as well. And he did have one younger brother whose name was Edwin, and Edwin lived to be 90 years old. So he eventually took over most of the business end of taking care of the Lemp estate.
Now, all of these Lemps who passed away early, who committed suicide, they all died by gunshot?
That's correct. Two in the heart and two in the head.
Okay. And these were different firearms. They didn't
Different
use this.
firearms.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Hmm.
And I'm a huge animal lover, so knowing that he took the dog just kind of hurts more than
It
people.
hurt. I know it. Me too. I mean, the first time I heard that, I went, "Oh, I could." But then I started really this communication again. Why? Why? Well, he loved her. He was obsessive about things. What maybe obsessive compulsive we call it. There's a lot of information about that out there. And he was like that. He wanted to control things. And the one thing that he could control with her was his love for her. That was his baby, his companion. He had never married, so that was his child. And he didn't feel that anyone would take care of her. And she probably was an older dog. He was an old man, and how long did he have her? And
Right.
he didn't know what would happen to her, so he decided, well, I'm going to take her with him. Now that's the thought of someone ready to commit suicide, which isn't balanced thought possibly, but I don't know if I was doing it. And you being an animal lover, I'd think of that too. Who's going to take care of my babies? My fur babies here.
Exactly.
So
What kind of dog was Servo?
you've heard barking in the background here.
I have
Well,
two.
there's been differing opinions about that. You have some people don't see her, and I do. She looks like a lab mix to me. She's not as tall as a Doberman would be, and she's got a bushy tail, which a Doberman would not have.
Mhm.
So, from all indications, she was either a lab mix or a lab type of dog. Very loving, very kind. She's a wonderful spirit there too. I know we'll get into that too, but she's one of the favorite spirits of all.
Well, I'm sure it's an animal. How could she
Yeah,
not be a favorite?
that's true. I agree. 100%.
So, following up on what you said earlier about these communications that you get, how would you describe those? Are they just, do you hear like a whisper? Is it a feeling? How do you get these communications?
All of the above, but most of the time I have to work a little bit for them. Um, by now, some people just probably could say they just sit there and all these images and things float to them and they see them and everything, which could be. But I listen and I'm quiet and I can sit in a room I used to more than I do now. The Lemp Mansion is pretty popular right now. It's hard to
Mhm.
be in there without a lot of people around. And so I listen to what's being said to me. So I've gotten some communications through that, some communications through my own questions. We have the five senses that we all know and love, like hearing and seeing and tasting, and I always forget one, but the sixth sense comes into play with that too, and we all have that as well. And that's our ability to communicate or to be involved with things that are around us, the paranormal, the other than normal, and that would bring in being able to communicate with other beings. Now, I also consider myself a spiritualist, which is someone who does communicate with the dead. So I listen for that, and I have for years, years and years and years, too many to even count, really. So yes, I do get communications through that mostly. Of
And I'm sure with so much tragedy in one place, that probably fuels a lot of why these entities, why these spirits are still there. Do you believe that?
I do, but it also was a boarding house. The mansion was for over 20 years, so there is some of that aspect too of some of the spirits that are there. But spirits usually remain in an earthbound state because of the manner of their death. So there you have 4 suicides. You have maybe other deaths that were sudden. Service death, obviously, the dog was shot, so she remained there. The spirit doesn't cross. It doesn't get to that point where it's going to the next level or crossing through the light or whatever you want to call it. So it stays in that earthbound state. Now, it could be their choice as well, that they feel they've got something unfinished or they've got some amends to make, or maybe someone on the other side makes them so totally anxious or angry or fearful that they don't cross. So there's all those aspects why a spirit stays in an earthbound state. Most spirits do cross over and they go on to either their eternal bliss, and sometimes they can come back to us too as little visits. We call them spirit guides.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it sounds like there are more than the 4 who committed suicide still lingering in the Lemp Mansion.
There are, and actually, the daughter is not there at all.
Okay.
She didn't commit suicide there, so it's and in fact, the father is not there. From my I've been doing this for a long time, and I have never encountered his spirit. I've encountered his story, but never his spirit. And I have a feeling, and this is my theory, that at the moment of his passing, that his son Frederick, who had been the son that died, that he was there and helped him in that transition. So he didn't linger as an earthbound spirit. But his wife, Julia, who died of cancer, is a spirit there. Now, she's there because she wanders and she's looking for one of her sons. Now, this is where a little bit of leap of faith comes in, because some people don't believe this child ever existed. Now, I was given his name as Zeke from Billy, but it could be a pet name or a nickname but other people call him some pretty ugly things. He was a deformed, disabled child, and he was very challenged in so many ways. But he was well loved by his family. But, there is not a lot of proof of that. There's no birth certificate. There is an unmarked grave in their mausoleum. And apparently, from my communication again, he died of a fall. Now, a fall could have been something from down a ladder, down a flight of steps, something like that. He suffered from a lot of deformities, and some people have likened it to what the Elephant Man would have looked like.
Okay.
Prothesis disease, I believe they call it, with the growths and the enlarged head and so forth. So, and Zeke is a spirit there. So we've got 5 Lemp family members. We've got a servant that I have first encountered when I first started working there. Very dormant. No, not much about her. Her name is Sarah. There's a little girl spirit that I've encountered numerous times, and other people have too. And then there's this man who I'm not sure where he fits in. Now, he was identified by me because I ran into him, and he kind of surrounded me with a really stinky smell. So I just kept calling him the smelly guy and the stinky man. But then others, I told it on, it was an actual one of the ghost shows, and they encountered him too, and said that the smell I was smelling, I thought it likened it to bad breath and horrible bad breath, but they said it mostly smelled like rotting flesh, and I went, ew, no, thank you for telling me that. But anyway, so after calling him that, someone suggested I call him Oscar. I went, I love that nice old-fashioned name, but then he said, this was a guy on tour, he said, I know, you know who Oscar is. He lives in a garbage can. He smells real bad, and he's real nasty. Because this Oscar guy didn't like people around him, like, leave me alone, it's my house, leave me alone, and stuff like that.
Right.
So there's 9, according to me. And it is according to the world, according to Betsy, So,
As it should be.
as it should be. I think so too.
I fully support that.
But there's others that wander through, and it's any given day it could be a parade or a large group or one. So.
Right. So following up on the Lemp family member who there's really no documentation about. Is he a child still? Is it a child spirit?
He is a child in his mind.
Okay.
According to what I have gathered and garnered, is that he was about 16 when he died. So that would make him a teenager. Right. But he still had the mind of a little boy, like a toddler boy, very, very small. Is that an engine bothering you at all? Because someone's revving an engine right outside my window here.
Oh, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear
that. Okay, good. Okay.
So not only did he have physical deformities, there may have been some developmental issues as well.
Oh, there was definitely. Now, his mother was approximately 55 years old, 56 years old when he was born. His father was in his early 60s. So that's 1904 approximately. So, prenatal care wasn't like it is now. Right. The way she died, she may have already had the beginnings of her cancer that took her life, because it was a female type cancer that took her life.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, you said that I think you said it was the first spirit you encountered at the Lemp Mansion was a woman, a servant possibly. Sarah, I think you said what her name was. Can you tell me about that encounter? How did that unfold, and what was that experience like?
Actually, I think Billy Lemp was my first spirit there.
Okay.
Because it was, I wasn't even involved with the Lemp Mansion. I had just gone there for dinner. And it was after dinner, and I was talking with the bartender, and he was regaling me with some interesting.
Sorry about that. I'm going to have to ask you to start over.
Where did I leave off?
That you were there for dinner, and the bartender. Okay. Then I lost you.
And the bartender was telling me some really kind of spooky stories, and so he said across the hall one of the suicides had happened. So I went over there. It was right up my alley. I'd been a paranormal investigator for years before that, and I felt an unease in not an ominous feeling, not a fearful feeling, but just an unease in that room. And I was looking around and I put my hand down on a table to lean on it a little bit and look up at the ceiling, and the table just shook out of my hand. And I thought, wow. And the person I was with was standing in the doorway, and he was out the door already. He was, oh, I don't want any part of that. So, but I was hooked from that point on. So I would say Billy Lemp was my first spirit that I encountered there. And I had actually been there a little bit before that, before I encountered Sarah. Now, when I knew that there was something around me, it was a smell. And it was a pleasant smell, though. It was a lovely smell, actually. It was like your old grandma's perfume, a very flowery smell. Well, as it happened in different places frequently, I began to pay more attention to it. Well, what is that smell? It's not an air freshener. It's not something in the house. So let's try to figure out what it is. And I could never do it. Well, then there was a picture that surfaced, and I wish that I had copied the picture or something, because it wasn't mine. And it was a woman in the courtyard, and she was standing with an older gentleman. She had one of those big hats that they used to wear, and he was kind of bent over a little bit, and it was just a very ethereal picture. It was very wispy and see-through, and of course that picture has disappeared long ago. But I knew from that moment on that there was something there. So then the name Sarah kept coming to me in my mind's ear. I kept hearing the name Sarah. So I put two and two together, that she was Sarah and that she was a servant. Now, when I started getting more information about Zeke, I knew that she was around where he was a lot. And so I put two and two together again, listened and so forth, that she took care of him. And that's why she's a spirit there. Spirits don't haunt where they don't know, and that was the only reason that she would stay, was to protect him. Now, I have not had an encounter with her in years. I mean, years. So I don't know if she's dormant or she's gone.
And it's your belief that she took care of Zeke in life and in death?
In life.
Okay.
Yes, that she's lingered because she felt he still needed her, and he probably did,
Right.
He's a very frightened young man.
It sounds like that, just based on our conversation so far, that most of your encounters have been fairly friendly, for lack of a better word. Have there been anything that has startled you or has worried you or any of the people that you work with there?
All the time. I mean, I can sound like I'm very, and I'm a very positive person, so I can sound very positive about these encounters, but when they were happening, they weren't so, they weren't so positive. I was scared, yeah, I was. I started saying something bad there. I was really scared. Like when I first encountered Oscar. He was mean. He was telling me to get out my house, and he flung his energy at me, and in the form of that stink, and that really scared me. I didn't know how to handle that. I stood up to him. I said, "I'm not scared of you." No, come on. All 5 foot of me stood up into this spirit and said, "I'm not afraid of you," and I was, but I couldn't let him know that. I said, "Come on, identify yourself to me," and he did, and it scared me. So things like that have happened. I've many times I've heard things or seen something fly by me, or and I'm there by myself, and it startles me and scares me. And other things are very pleasant, like Sarah's smell, or one time I was walking up the steps and I had my arms full of stuff for my tour. I do tours on Monday nights, and before the people got there, and I was almost to the top of the stairs, and had my arms full, and I lost my footing. Now, this staircase is really a tall, long staircase. If you remember, it's right as you come in the door. And I started to fall backwards, and something grabbed the front of my shirt and pulled me forward. So I landed on my face, but I didn't kill myself. I would have been a ghost. Come back to me. Oh.
There you are.
I can always tell when you're frozen because your eyes close.
Not
Where was
sleeping. I'm very, very interested. So something pulled you forward rather than letting you fall down the steps.
Right. So there's those things. But then there is the first time I spent the night there, I was downstairs on the first floor sleeping on a cot. more or less. And it was very late, and I was really scared. First time I had spent the night there, I was in the middle of the hallway, you know, and I did have an assistant with me, and he was sleeping on the couch fairly close to me. And I felt someone walking around the bed, and pounding footsteps, boom, 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 and stopping and whoa, leaning over me and making this god awful piercing noise. I just kept repeating to myself, or to him, I guess, I'm too scared, you got to go away. I'm too scared, you got to go away. So there have been many times that I've been not only startled, but downright really scared.
Hmm.
But as you do something, anything you do, it doesn't become second nature to you. If you did that, then it'd be boring. But if you get a little bit of a handle on it, okay, now I can handle this. What is that? Who is that? Can you tell me who you are? And I still have my moments.
And it's a very large building too, right? It's 30 something rooms, am I right?
Yeah, if you count every nook and cranny, it is. They right now they have 6 bed and breakfast rooms, or they actually have 5 now. But and then there's 3 dining areas down. Well, actually 4 dining areas down on the first floor, and so there's a lot of space. The basement is the kitchen, access dining. They have murder mystery theater down there, so there's all that. So you're in the first floor. You've got 2 floors above you and 1 floor below you, and you're there all by yourself. I gotta tell you, it takes a little bit of nerves.
I bet.
It does.
Uh,
It does.
Now, when you encountered Oscar, where that stench was, and you said he like threw his energy at you, where were you in the mansion?
I was on the third floor in it wasn't a bed and breakfast room then. It was just a room, and it hadn't been remodeled yet. It's beautiful now, but then they had no electricity, and it was great for ghost hunting. I'll tell you that. But they've made them into bed and breakfast rooms. But I was in there doing my thing with one of my team, and just we used to do that a lot. Be able to go up in the third floor and just kind of listen and look, and I don't know, just try to get the lay of the land, so to speak. And it just all of a sudden I knew somebody else was there,
Uh,
and I kept listening, and then I kept hearing in my mind's ear, and that get out, my house. And
uh,
that's when I stood up to him and got slammed with the stank.
yes, you're
It
fine
wasn't a stink.
yourself.
It wasn't even a stank. It was awful. Hey,
Great. Now, since you do what you do, I would assume that a lot of people tell you about their experiences at the mansion. Do any of those stories stand out to you as either amazing or surprising, or just at the forefront of your mind?
a lot of times people will want to share a story, and I always listen, because even if someone else, some other person like me, would think, oh, I've heard that story 100 times before. I've seen an orb. I know, but that's new for the person that's telling you that, and they
Mhm.
want to know what they've seen, or what, to validate them, and so I try my best to always do that. But when people bring me pictures, I just absolutely love it. There was not too long ago, a woman shared a picture, and she was on the second floor in one of the bathrooms, just looking around. She didn't even have her camera. She had a phone camera going, and her phone. I think the flash might have gone off or something. So she walked out in the hallway to see what she had, and she just saw the tub and the shop. And then she looked above where it was, and there's a figure of. It looks like Charles Lemp to me, looking in the window. Now, the window's on the second floor, mind you, so it wasn't a person, and
Mhm.
she had captured that. So those little moments when somebody besides myself picks a picture up, or said, I think there's a cat in my picture. Well, oh my gosh, there sure is. It's a very exciting moment. And stories are just, I'm not there all the time. And they used to keep a book there where people could write down their stories, and they've taken that away a number of years ago. But and people were misusing it, I guess. But it's just it stopped being a where
Trying
to
to keep
end up.
trying to keep my eyes open. I don't want my eyes to close again. You're saying that you had the book, but the book went away because it wasn't being used correctly.
Yeah,
but that people still share their stories with you.
yeah, people still share the stories. When I first started working there would be boarders. Now, remember, it was a boarding house from 1950 to the early part of the 1970s, and these people lived there. It wasn't the Lemp Mansion then. It was, I don't even know what it was called. It was owned by a woman and her husband, and they didn't care about the house. They just wanted to fill the rooms. So there was a very transient population. And every so often, someone would come in and say, "Oh, I used to, when I first started, I was working as a tour guide on Sunday afternoons. It was very, very difficult because Sunday is one of their popular days, and they serve this wonderful all-you-can-eat chicken dinner. So the place was always packed. And there I was trying to do a tour, you know. So, but I met so many interesting people, and they would tell me these stories about encountering a spirit or encountering a cold feeling and feeling that they couldn't stay in the house, or hearing a dog bark when there was no dog, and different things like that. It was just, I wrote them all down so I remember them, obviously. Of
Right.
course, I don't remember what I had for breakfast today, but I can tell you about a story I heard 25 years ago. Ah,
Well, that's probably more exciting than any breakfast, but yeah, I
I
can understand
think
that.
so. I think so. Although mine was pretty good today. No, I'm kidding.
Now, I know that you said, and forgive me, I can't remember his name, the limp child that did all the traveling and collected the art.
That
Um,
would be Charles.
Charles, when he would send that art or whatever he collected back to the mansion, where did it go? Is
Well,
it
in
still
the
there?
mansion, towards the back of the house, there are three rooms that they used for, well, they called them the vaults. So in one room, they kept money, actually, because they paid the workers in cash. Remember I told you that? Well, they
Right.
also had other things that they needed to secure. So they had three of them. They had one on the second floor, one on the first floor, and one in the basement. Now, the one in the basement today is used for all the food storage, and there's a walk-in refrigerator, and there's everything down there for the kitchen. The
Mhm.
second floor is still used as a vault because now they've got a little mini museum in there and a gift shop and so forth. The third one is the office for the current restaurant, for the Lemp Mansion restaurant. So that's where they would be, all the things would be stored. He knew it was safe.
Mhm.
It's got 24-inch thick walls, solid concrete, so it's fireproof and probably hurricane proof or whatever. So nothing would ever happen to his items, and he liked those type of things. I think it comforted him to buy things and have them around him.
It's interesting that they weren't displayed, though, that they were kind of hidden away, even though he was a collector.
He wouldn't let people in to see them, even if he had. He was a collector for himself, I think,
Okay.
because he didn't like people in his home.
Mhm.
Even if his family came, they would have to leave their coats and shoes at the door, and he would launder them and give them back to them as they walked out. Even coins in their pockets couldn't come in the house because it
Mhm.
was germy. So he wouldn't have liked that at all. Now, some of the things did get dispersed, I guess, to family members
Mhm.
after his death. For instance, his brother Edwin, who's the last one to be alive,
Mhm.
he had a vast collection of things. Now there was rumors that everything that he had he destroyed or burned before his death, but I think some of it survived and no one exactly knows where it is. I'm sure they're available somewhere.
Mhm.
I think even our history museum, the one that the official history museum has some artifacts from the Lemps, some papers and things like that. So, but he also Charles was a very generous man. So in his will, I'm sure he willed a lot of his things to certain people that he
Mhm.
wanted to make sure were taken care of.
Right. Where are these Limp family members buried? Are they all buried together in one cemetery, or are they in
They
different?
are. They have a mausoleum, and it is in it's a very famous big cemetery called Bell Fountain Cemetery. It is on one side of a road. The other side of the road is the Catholic cemetery called Calvary Cemetery. And in both of those cemeteries, a lot of our founding fathers from St. Louis are buried. And there's like General Sherman from the Civil War. There's all kinds of people, the Bushes and so forth. But the largest one in Bell Fountain Cemetery is the Lemp Cemetery. and their graves are in there, including Lillian's. But the only one that is not in there is Charles, because Charles wanted to be cremated and buried on what he called his farm. So they, per his wishes, they took his ashes and buried him on the farm, which nobody knows where that is right now. I mean, they know basically where the farm is, but there's subdivisions on top of it. So who knows where Charles' ashes lay?
So somebody could be living on top of him and has no
Yeah,
idea.
right now, right.
Wow. Wow.
Yes.
Now, is it true that there used to be, or there are tunnels that connected the mansion to the brewery?
Oh yeah, now that's an interesting subject. Um, you could get to there was a tunnel that would lead from the house that you could get to from the basement area, and it would lead you down underneath the middle of the street, which was still a street then, down 60 feet below the brewery complex itself. Now it's a natural cave though. It's in fact it was proven to be a prehistoric cave, some of it. There was a tour cave connected to it from 1940 to 1960 called Cherokee Cave. And so that part of it is there, but also the Lemp Cave, all of it's still there. It's just that it's been in such disrepair. I don't Repair is not the right word. It wasn't taken care of. So I've been down there a number of times. Can't go there anymore, but you used to be able to if you knew the right person, and I knew the right person. So you'd have to wear boots, and and the mud would seep into your boots, but
Mhm.
some of it you'd see like the hooks that they would hook the barrels of beer as they were in the beer production, and it's just amazing. It was truly amazing, and it's all still there.
Now, in your opinion, is there any activity in those tunnels or in the brewery itself?
In the brewery, I didn't really feel much. In the tunnels, I felt absolutely nothing. But I was also in awe of it. So I
Mhm.
maybe wasn't paying attention to what I could have felt. You have to dedicate some time and energy and concentration when you're dealing with spirits in order to know that they're around you. You know. So, and I was a little bit more concerned with what I was seeing, going, oh, this is so cool, to not maybe miss something that would have
Mhm.
gone right by me or something. So I'm not saying it's not. I just didn't feel anything.
I see. And since you have had these encounters with these different individuals, do you think that there is a certain message or a certain something that they're wanting you to share to make themselves known? Do you feel like you have some kind of mission for these spirits? Are they telling you something specific?
I Actually, that's the first time anyone's ever asked me that, and I love that
Later.
house.
Okay, so we'll try that
Especially,
again.
yeah. Okay.
So
Where?
I know you heard my question, and then right before you started to answer it, I lost you. So
Okay. I said that is the first time anyone's ever asked me that, and I love that question. I just love it because I do feel that I have a responsibility maybe, or a mission, or that they're trying to let me know, because I'm very respectful of them. I am. I don't yell. I don't try to intimidate them to be with me. I give the story as I know it, without some embellishment. I mean, not embellishment, but some drama, I guess. I mean, I have to make it interesting, but is respect for their home. It is their home. I think Billy Lemp and I have that affinity because I looked beyond the fact that he was kind of a brutal man, and looked for the why was he a brutal man? What happened to him? And how can I figure this out? And I think that he appreciated that. He does like women, and I don't think it was that. Some women that go in there, he's a little bit I don't know, he gets a little too close to them and they feel uncomfortable. But with Charles particularly, that is his home. He wants his home to be respected, and that's what makes them angry, is disrespect of their family, of their story. And if I have conveyed anything, anything, and since the time I've been there, is the fact that people are more respectful when they're around me, and they don't call Zeke by the ugly names as much as they used to.
Good.
I don't know if you know what they are, and you may have heard that, but I never used the name that he was an animal name that he was called. And I hear even people that before I used to hear them call him the bad name, they don't call him that anymore. So that respect to me was a big breakthrough and a big, I don't know, a big accomplishment for me, I guess you might call it. So that would be what I think that they're using me through, is to get their story there and to let people know that they are still there. I'm wondering, and I've been wondering this for the last month and some since I've been here away from the Lemp Mansion, and that no one is staying the night there. There's a very small little, I guess you might call it, skeleton crew. That's kind of a bad, not a good analogy, but workings off and on. They do serve their wonderful chicken dinner curbside service on Sundays, but other than that, there's nobody there.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if at all, that they're wondering what's happened.
Right. Where is it?
Where is that? Where is that woman? Where is that person I can talk to? And
Mhm.
I don't know. Maybe Billy was a party guy. Maybe he likes the parties that go on there. The carousing and the drinking and the happiness and the fun, and maybe he likes it.
Right.
I don't know.
And he might be missing that right now.
I keep wondering that. I have no clue. I really don't, but I keep wondering that myself. So
So
anyway,
outside of this pandemic situation we're in, if things were normal, do you think that they are happy with what the Lemp Mansion has become and what it represents in St. Louis now? Because it is so historic.
I don't think they have a clue of what it represents. I don't think that they care so much that they're, that they, as a restaurant, I don't think that's the thing. I think what they are happy with is that it is well kept. That people come in there and they, for whatever they're listening to them, they are having a good time, or they're enjoying themselves, or that it's still in existence. A lot of places that you hear about, especially historic places in all big cities, just go by the wayside. And here that house is 151 years later, and it gets better all the time. They're always improving something, not changing it, but improving it, giving it a new paint job, or fixing the roof, or fixing the radiators, which still work. And it's an amazing place. It's a very unique place, I think.
Oh, it definitely is. And I'm sure the renovations, like you said, have only improved it. If it was built in the 1860s, was air conditioning even thought of? Was there heat?
Oh, yeah, really. I'm sure it might have been, who knows, but
There you are.
wherever we go,
I
there
have
we are.
I have one more kind of vague question for you. So you may not have an answer for it, or you might. But I always like to do this towards the ends of my interviews. Is there anything that I did not ask you about, or that you just want to make sure that we share in this podcast about either your experience, a specific spirit, the location itself? Open floor for you. I just want to make sure that I give you that opportunity.
Well, one thing I'd like to say is that I'm a very accessible person. I mean, people can contact me. I'm not. If you have a question, your viewers or whatever, and you would give them my phone number or my email, or that I am more than happy to speak to people. And I may not have the right answer for you, but then again, I may, or we could just chat, or you may have a question, and you believe in ghosts, but your friends don't, and they're making fun of you. Well, then you've got an ally in me, and I can, tell you you're not crazy. That there are things in life that happen that we can't explain. And if we try to explain it away, which is our human way of doing things, well, that's the way. Also, I do tours of the Lemp Mansion. I do public tours on Mondays. I do private tours. I do lectures. I mean, there's all kinds of things. If people are interested in the paranormal, that maybe somebody like me could help you with. But as far as the Lemp Mansion itself, it's a very accommodating place as well. They are welcoming of people coming into to that environment. Of course, it is a restaurant and it is a bed and breakfast inn, but they're very friendly folk. They come on in. You want to look upstairs, as long as there's nobody staying upstairs. No, you can walk upstairs. It's just a different atmosphere than most places that you go. Plus, their food is darn good. I miss that too. My gosh, it's been a month since I've eaten any good fried chicken. Oh well.
Well, speaking of being accessible, as I piece this together, if I have any additional questions for you, do you mind if I shoot you an email?
Oh my gosh, I'd love it.
Okay. Excellent.
I would love to speak with you again.
Okay.
It's so much fun.
I can't thank you enough. And like I said, being a St. Louis native, I've always loved the Lemp Mansion. I've loved the brewery. I have great memories there. And when travel is a thing again, I plan to get back to St. Louis and check it out again when I visit family. So.
Well, when that happens and you do come back, make sure you call me and I'll go there with you, and we can explore together. And I'll get you in all the rooms and stuff like that. I got the keys,
It's me who knows the right people.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
And of course, as I get this episode pulled together, I'll make sure you get the link to the podcast. It will be on my website with the rest of them as well, but I'll make sure you get a heads up when it goes online, which will probably be in a week or so, depending on work schedules.
Okay. And now, and thanks to you, now I know how to use Skype.
I'm glad I can help you with that. And if you get stuck again, you have another resource. I'm happy to help you out in the future.
I'll call you. Or if I'm in the Tampa area, I'll call you. And you can
definitely do.
Yeah.
Thank you.